Bruno Guimaraes has just delivered one of the best individual World Cup campaigns of any midfielder on the planet, and Arsenal are watching every single touch. Only one player at this entire tournament has produced more assists than him, and that player is Michael Olise. 4 assists in this competition alone. That is not a small sample size. That is a Brazilian international at the peak of his powers, doing it on the biggest stage football has to offer, while a Premier League champion sits in the background trying to decide how badly it wants him. At the exact same moment, on the other side of the pitch, Bradley Barcola has just scored for France in a 3-0 demolition of Sweden. He collected a brilliant pass from Michael Olise and finished with real power, right in front of a watching world, right in front of 2 Premier League clubs who both want him. And in the middle of all of this, Manu Kone is about to walk out for France against Paraguay in a World Cup knockout match, replacing an injured Aurelien Tchouameni, with every scout in Europe suddenly paying closer attention than they were 24 hours ago. 3 players. One club sitting at the centre of it all trying to make sense of what to do next. That club is Arsenal. Here is what is actually at risk right now. Newcastle have made their position clear. They do not want to sell Bruno Guimaraes. The not-for-sale label has been placed on him again, publicly, deliberately, as a signal to Arsenal and to anyone else circling. If Arsenal wait too long, if they hesitate the way they have hesitated before this summer, they risk losing a genuine difference-making midfielder to their own indecision, rather than to a rival bid. And this is not a theoretical risk. This has already happened twice this summer. Sandro Tonali is now heading to Tottenham after Arsenal turned him down over wage demands and agent fees. Jeremy Monga is heading to Manchester City after Arsenal dithered over a gap of just £3 to £4 million. Twice, real targets have slipped away, not because rivals outbid Arsenal, but because Arsenal did not move quickly enough. That pattern is now the central tension of this transfer window. Bruno Guimaraes is the biggest test yet of whether that pattern continues. If you want the full picture on every major Arsenal transfer story this summer, backed only by verified facts and independent analysis, this is exactly the kind of channel you should be subscribed to. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next few weeks in this Bruno Guimaraes situation are going to move fast, and you do not want to miss how it unfolds. Let me walk you through exactly where this stands, piece by piece, because there is a lot happening at once, and it is important to separate what is confirmed from what is still just talk. Bruno Guimaraes, the priority that keeps growing louder. Start with the headline situation. Bruno Guimaraes is currently a Newcastle player. He is Brazilian, he is 28 years old, turning 29 in November, and he has 2 years remaining on his contract at Newcastle. That contract length matters, because it gives Newcastle real leverage. They are under no pressure to sell a player who is not about to run down his deal. Newcastle Chronicle insider Lee Ryder has spoken directly about this situation, and his comments give us the clearest picture yet of where things stand. He confirmed that Newcastle broke the story themselves, that their intention is very much to keep Bruno. The not-for-sale tag, in his words, was placed on the player again. That is not a rumour. That is Newcastle stating their position publicly and repeatedly. But here is the part that keeps this story alive. In the same breath, Ryder said he is still being told that Arsenal are still in there. His exact framing was that it is still very early in the window. That is an important detail for you to hold on to. Early in the window means positions can still shift. Clubs draw hard lines in July that soften by August. Newcastle saying no right now does not mean Newcastle will still be saying no in 6 weeks. Ryder went further and explained the mechanism by which this could change. He said that if a bid was to come in, that could leave Newcastle with a decision to make, especially if Bruno himself turns around and tells the club he no longer wants to be there. That, in his words, is the dangerous fact for Newcastle. Player power is real in these situations. A club can insist all it wants that a player is not for sale, but if the player himself pushes for the exit, the calculation changes very quickly. There is also a World Cup complication at play here, and it is worth understanding because it explains why nothing dramatic has happened yet. Ryder pointed out that Bruno is currently in what he called a bubble. He is fully focused on the World Cup. He is not speaking externally about his future. Ryder even said he would not expect Newcastle to be badgering him for information at this moment. In other words, the entire situation is paused, not because interest has cooled, but because the player is rightly focused on international football, and nobody wants to disturb that. So what happens when the World Cup bubble bursts? Ryder was direct about this too. He said that if Bruno becomes the recipient of a formal offer or approach from Arsenal, that could change things again. That single sentence tells you everything about the current phase of this deal. Nothing has technically happened yet. No official approach has been confirmed. But the door is open, and Ryder is telling us clearly that a real bid could be the catalyst that moves this from speculation into something concrete. Now let us talk about numbers, because this is where the analysis gets sharper. Arsenal are said to be confident that £65 million is enough to get a deal done. That is Arsenal's internal valuation, their belief about what it would take. Newcastle, on the other hand, continue to insist he is not for sale. Full stop. which suggests their valuation, if they were even willing to discuss one, sits above whatever number is currently being floated. This is a classic transfer standoff. One side has a number in mind, the other side has not even engaged with numbers because they have not accepted the premise of a sale. The only thing that breaks a standoff like this is a formal bid landing on the table, forcing an actual response rather than a repeated public stance. Why Arsenal cannot afford to sit back. This is where the analysis needs to widen out, because Bruno Guimaraes cannot be looked at in isolation. He has to be understood in the context of how Arsenal have already handled this transfer window, because the pattern so far has not been encouraging. Sandro Tonali was a genuine target. Arsenal turned that move down over wage demands and agent fees. He is now going to Tottenham. Read that back. A direct rival in the same city is getting a player Arsenal walked away from over what amounts to negotiating friction rather than an unbridgeable gap in interest. Then there is Jeremy Monga. Arsenal dithered, and the gap that cost them this player was reportedly just £3 to £4 million. In a transfer market where clubs are spending £50, £60, £70 million on individual players without blinking, losing a target over a £3 to £4 million disagreement is the kind of detail that fans and pundits alike are entitled to question. Some pockets of the Arsenal fan base are already criticising sporting director Andrea Berta for what they see as a lack of urgency in the market. Based on the Tonali and Monga situations alone, that criticism is not coming from nowhere. This is exactly why the Bruno Guimaraes situation carries so much weight right now. It is early in the window, yes. There is still time, yes. But the last two examples of Arsenal moving slowly did not end with Arsenal getting the player anyway. They ended with rival clubs walking away with the signature. If Arsenal apply the same pace to Bruno Guimaraes that they applied to Tonali and Monga, the outcome could follow the same pattern. There is also a football reason, beyond the transfer politics, for why getting a deal like this done matters, and it comes down to squad fitness heading into next season. There are real fitness concerns surrounding key players including Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, and William Saliba. William Saliba, in fact, is currently playing through and managing a back injury while still representing France at this World Cup. That detail alone tells you Arsenal cannot rely on their current squad depth to carry a full season without reinforcement. Getting a player like Bruno Guimaraes in early, in time for pre-season, in time to be integrated into the tactical system before competitive football resumes, is not just a nice to have. It is a genuine necessity if key players are already carrying knocks before a ball has even been kicked in the new campaign. Bradley Barcola, the winger conversation running in parallel. While the Bruno Guimaraes story develops in midfield, there is a completely